Join EMARKETER on September 15th in New York for the Future of Digital Summit, our biggest event of the year. Hear exclusive research and executive insights on AI visibility, commerce media, streaming, and agentic commerce, and leave with a roadmap of what comes next. Click the registration link in the show notes for tickets. Welcome everyone to In the Game, an eMarketer sports marketing podcast. This is a conversation about the spectacle of sports. Hello folks, I'm Marcus, and today I'm alongside, living in New York, newsletter analyst Marisa Jones.
Hi Marcus, thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for being here. Also joined by Principal Analyst, living in Philly, Max Willens.
Yo.
Yes. Today we're talking all about the spectacle around sports. So Trump's UFC fights bring historic spectacle to White House, writes Danielle Kurtzleben of NPR. The UFC built an arena on the South Lawn of the White House and hosted 7 MMA cage fights in honor of the nation's 250th anniversary. As Joseph Gedeon of the Guardian, British newspaper, describes, bright lights, fireworks, and fighter plane flyovers, thousands of spectators, and the first major professional sporting event ever staged at the White House. Sponsor logos on the mat included Polymarket, the offshore crypto casino Stake, a tourism campaign for the once ostracized Riyadh, and Bud Light. Matt Moret of The Athletic notes that UFC Freedom 250, as it was called, drew an average of 7 million viewers to Paramount Plus in the US, according to Nielsen. The UFC said total viewership was 17 million people across the US and Latin America. Domestically, the UFC said Freedom 250 was the most viewed event in the countries and companies domestically history, as well as the most watched live event replay in Paramount Plus history. So it broke all the records. MMA League said the metrics, once you included Australia, India, China, or the others, globally 34 million people tuned in, making it one of the most watched events globally in history too. Max, I'll start with you. We wanted to talk about spectacle events, or the spectacle of events. Me and Stuart, who runs the team, were talking about this, and we thought it'd be an interesting conversation for an episode. There's a few ways of looking at this. One of the ways is the way that I've kind of framed it, which is these one-off marquee sporting events. Another are these kind of sporting occasion adjacent events. So they would be like the NFL draft, something that is sporting related, but not the actual sporting event. What do you make of the size, the scale of something like these one-off marquee sporting events?
Well, I guess it sort of depends on which definition we're going with. I tend to think of, when we were prepping for this, I was sort of thinking more of I guess you would call them sport adjacent things, like the drafts, like exhibition day, like signing days for college athletics. And to me, what just continues to astonish me is how large how large these things have become, right? I mean, the NBA draft, which, I'm a pretty hardcore basketball fan, and even I acknowledge that sometimes I'm sitting there watching the second round and thinking, like, this is a truly indefensible use of your time. Like, why are you doing this? But there are apparently millions like me. I mean, there were, the NBA draft averaged 4.2 million people watching it this past year. And that's up 10%. This isn't like a completely flatlined, identified group of sickos. This is a growing population of people. The NFL draft.
Well, really quickly, it's also the 2026 NBA draft drew double the audience of an average NBA game, which is shocking. But sorry, the NFL, please.
No, I mean, that's actually a really wonderful way, or thing to point out is that sort of distance from the average. The NFL, like they averaged 13.3 million viewers for the third round. When you get out over the full 3 days, days 2 and 3 really truly are for sickos. Over the 3 days, it averaged 6.6 million. But that again was up over time. And I think that, the things that keep kind of growing these things are the reasons why you see brand interest grow in them. Not so much the like growing top line number of people, although by linear television standards, 4.2 million people tuning into anything is going to make an advertiser sit up and pay attention. But
Hmm.
I think that they offer a lot of really unique uh, kind of up branding opportunities that as a marketer, I would think are maybe kind of irresistible, right? Like there's a lot of passion and excitement, but it's
Hmm.
also by sporting event standards, like it's an almost zero stakes setting, right? It's all upside, you know? Even if some team that you root for picks a player you weren't expecting them to pick, you're still gonna go, well, the hell with it. I support him, like even if it's not the guy that you thought that they were going to draft or some trade happens that gets people all exercised. It's still basically a moment of, it's big moments of joy
Yeah.
every 15 minutes,
Yeah.
give or take, for
There's no
hours on end.
loser. Hmm.
That's exactly right. And so, in that context, like it would be like watching the, Olympics, but the athlete you're rooting for is guaranteed to medal, like, and that's kind of an intoxicating proposition for an advertiser. And so
Yeah.
there's that, and there's a separate thing. I don't want to blather on too much, but like there's also a sort of separate local advertiser dimension, which I think is really interesting to think about.
Mm.
Like sticking with the NFL draft, for example, Pittsburgh's city tourism organization said that over 800,000 people visited Pittsburgh for the NFL draft last year. And for context, like Pittsburgh's metropolitan population is 2.4 million people, right? Like Pittsburgh's city population is 300,000 people. So like if you're a local or regional advertiser, like these kinds of things are you know, kind of once a year, maybe even like once a generation kind of opportunities if you're
Yeah.
not kind of on that short list of cities that gets to host this stuff all the time.
Yeah. It was record attendance. And 800,000 people is um I mean, we're talking
Bonkers.
multiples, yeah, multiples bigger than a Super Bowl audience, in terms of like people being at the Super Bowl. So I think that's incredibly impressive. It's also interesting as well because the draft used to be in one place. It was in New York for 50 years. And then about 12 years ago, they started hopping around between different cities, rotating. And that's had a huge impact in terms of local ratings, local everything, really. Marissa, I'm glad Max brought up the NFL draft because I was looking, the NFL draft, he said 13.2 million people in 2026. That's nearly as many viewers as a Thursday night football game on Amazon Prime. That drew about 15.3 million. And I thought Nielsen had a really good article. They were pointing out just how big something like the draft has become. They said when Tom Brady, widely recognized as the GOAT of football, was selected by the New England Patriots with the 199th pick in the 2000 NFL draft. The announcement was made in front of a small crowd at Madison Square Garden and a modest ESPN2 audience. 26 years later, Fernando Mendoza's selection as number one pick by Las Vegas Raiders became a major spectacle, announced by the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, before hundreds of thousands of fans in Pittsburgh, 13 million people tuning in across the major networks, billions of impressions on social media. Things have changed quite a lot in terms of the importance of these events.
I think one of the kind of unique draws of these events, especially like NFL, NBA drafts, is to your point that you said earlier, the NBA draft, I believe, accounted for more viewership than actual NBA games.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
kind of the appeal potentially to marketers, specifically, is that these events often capture audiences who aren't necessarily super tuned in sports viewers. They're much more casual fans who are kind of tuning into this spectacle event to see. It's very much a unique event that maybe people who aren't watching every sports game still want to see who's going to be on their team, who they're going to see throughout the year highlights
Yeah.
of, um, rather than having to watch the whole game. So
Hmm.
I think for marketers, that does open up opportunities, but also maybe introduces some confusion because you're not necessarily marketing to these passionate, engaged audiences who are tuning in for every single game. There's a much wider audience there to appeal to, which I think creates the need for specific strategies that appeal to these more casual fans.
I just want to add to that by saying that I think one of the things that's you see also too though that the teams themselves and the leagues, I guess, as well have kind of digested that reality, and
Mhm.
it manifests in like the way that they approach it, right? So like there was this big thing that the LA Rams's social team got a lot of shine for during this past NFL draft, where like right, I think it was maybe right before the NFL draft started, they put together this like skit on Instagram with Snoop Dogg and O'Shea Jackson Jr. that was meant to be like a parody of the movie Friday called Thursday. And that did like crazy numbers. And it's the sort of thing that, like for good or ill, like the a lot of teams' social media accounts, like they try to keep things light and fun, but like during the season, they sort of can't, get too silly, or else
Hmm.
their fans get upset about it. But in a setting like this, where like the whole point is to just get excited about
Yeah.
meeting someone new, like it really gives these teams an opportunity to sort of let their hair down metaphorically, and like I think that that's also sort of contributed to the growing interest in partnering and activating around these
Hmm.
kinds of things.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's interesting too because even if people don't like the idea of the event, it can still do huge numbers. And what I'm referencing here is the UFC 250. As I said, it's the most highest, most watched UFC event domestically. Public opinion would not have suggested that it was going to be popular, but it didn't stop it being the most watched. According to Reuters Ipsos poll, just 16%, 1/6, of US adults thought it would be appropriate to hold an MMA mixed martial arts fighting match on the White House lawn. Even among Republicans, the idea wasn't popular. 31% saying it's appropriate, 22 disapproving, 36 neither. But the spectacle of it just kind of draws you in. Similar to the Jake Paul Mike Tyson heavyweight fight. That shattered records, becoming the most streamed sporting event in history. Estimated 108 million people or live viewers globally tuning into that. That Super Bowl numbers, one in five Netflix households globally tuned into that, and it was a terrible fight. Fight's generous, and so a lot of the time, the event doesn't even have to be magnificent. Just the hype around it is enough to draw people in.
Well, I think that there's what you're getting at here, Marcus, is something that I think is also really, really important to underline here, which is that like we as a sort of culture, I guess, I think there's definitely kind of like a hunger and a largely unsatiated hunger for stuff that we can all experience collectively, right? I
Mm,
mean, it's funny,
great
before we
point.
started taping, we were all just asking each other about the Odyssey, which I don't know what the box office figures are going to be by the time this episode comes out, but I'm sure the answer is like huge. I mean, that it's turned into like a gigantic phenomenon of a thing. And you look at just like film box office figures generally, and it shows that between that and kind of like live sports viewing going up, I think that what all of that speaks to in a sort of broader cultural sense is that people want to experience something together, even if it's something that they don't necessarily like understand at a high level or find that interesting. I mean, even the World Cup's a great
Hmm.
example, right? Like
Hmm.
I went to Philadelphia, which was one of the host cities for the World Cup, had this gigantic FIFA Fan Fest thing that was set up actually not so far from my house. And I went once with my family. And I would say that, first of all, the attendance was crazy. There was clearly several thousand people there. I was there for a quarterfinal match. And I would say maybe 30% of the attendees were people with, kits on for certain sides. But probably 60% were people that were just gawking and like they I could tell barely had a handle on what was happening in the match. They like, didn't understand why, when players were off sides, they didn't understand stoppage time. But they were there because they were like, this is happening and it's happening and we're all here and we're gonna
Hmm.
figure it out. And I think that that's something that's worth kind of thinking about too, especially when it comes to like the Jake Paul fight, right? Like the people that tuned into that are not fans of the pugilist arts, right? Like they
Yeah.
were just like a guy I've heard of, another guy I've heard of are gonna beat the bejesus out of each other, and I don't have to leave my couch to watch it.
Yeah.
So I do think that like that's actually something that is worth lingering on or talking about a bit is like how much more brands and media companies can do to serve this hunger that we all have for something that we all kind of take in together, whether it's exciting or grotesque or, both.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, large audiences, but also live audiences, appointment viewing, so to speak. Another version of that is the Formula One, which is become a lot more popular in the US with the addition of the races in Las Vegas and Miami. The 2025 Formula One season. So they have, for people who don't follow Formula One, they have it's a 3 day event, travel around the world, about 20 races throughout the year, travel around the world to different countries, different cities for the race. And then Friday they practice, Saturday they have a qualifying, see who's going to go where in the line, and then Sunday is the race. In 2025 Formula One season, the Grand Prix Sunday races averaged about 76 million live viewers globally. The qualifying sessions on Saturday averaged roughly 50 to 60 million viewers. In the US market, about 50% of the Sunday race audience pays attention to the Saturday. So again, tens of millions of people tuning into qualifying, which is basically just like, I don't know, half an hour of watching cars individually kind of go around the track and overtake each other very rarely, because they're all racing against each other to qualify. So there is a huge appetite for really anything live, anything spectacle. Marissa, how do folks market around the spectacle of events or spectacle events? What changes for an advertiser at this type of an occasion?
Yeah, I think beyond what I said about kind of focusing on the more casual viewer, there are kind of a need to focus on often these events are there's a big lead up to them. They're multi-day often,
Hmm.
like the draft. So there is the need to also plan around building anticipation before the event, perhaps using giveaways, creator content, things like that to kind of build anticipation, but also the need to stay active pretty much every day of the event or throughout the duration of the event. There is also an opportunity to extend the momentum afterwards the event. There's highlights, behind the scenes content.
Great point.
It does kind of give, I think, a bigger window than just a one-off sports game might. Obviously, there's tournaments like the World Cup that also kind of have this storyline almost of continuing throughout several weeks or days. So I think there is a need to kind of tailor a strategy that way.
Yeah, I think this is a brilliant point, Max. It's all about the story
Yeah.
and the quality of the match, or the match that is to come is almost secondary to this long kind of promotional build up that is the story behind the match.
Hmm.
Oh, for sure. And I think also even to extend it still further, there's the opportunity to sort of use the moment itself as a springboard for something that continues on afterwards, right? Like I was looking at um, this list of the NFL draftees whose Instagram followings spiked the most after getting drafted.
Oh, interesting.
But think again about like the opportunity for that, right? Like Instagram can't help itself. Like they've changed their algorithm a lot, but like one of the things that they are seemingly hidebound to do is that once you follow an account, the first few posts after that account gets, you follow that account, you see those posts.
Hmm.
And, that's a huge, huge, cheap little opportunity for, if I'm a brand that's partnered with some kid since his, days as a college athlete via NIL, like the first posts you have them do after they get drafted by whatever NFL or NBA team it is, like that no, that post is going to do numbers because all of a sudden that kid has tens or even hundreds of thousands of new followers who are
Hmm.
you know desperately excited to see what they have to say about literally anything. And so I think that there's a big opportunity to sort of use it as a springboard that goes off into the future. How
Yeah,
far it goes has a lot of variability, right? I
yeah.
mean, like when we were going to discuss this, for some reason, the first thing that came into my mind was this ad that Johnny Davis made for Taco Bell before he got drafted. I'm sure nobody who listens to this podcast knows who Johnny Davis is unless they follow the
Mm-mm.
Washington Wizards. But he was like a
Mm-mm.
kind of a, you know, tough bucket getting swing guy at out of Wisconsin, and he was drafted, I think maybe like eighth. And he went on to completely flame out. Like even in summer league, people were like,
Oh,
"Oh, geez,
yikes.
this is tough." And he was out of the league like that. So,
Mhm.
it's not like this is the start of, you mentioned Tom Brady. This isn't always like the start of a 20-year,
Right.
relationship and
Epic
chance,
career.
but
Hmm.
exactly. But I did want to just, this is my too long way of saying that, like, sometimes the pop of, being handed that hat and, dapping up a commissioner on stage can sometimes just be the start of something as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. I thought also it's interesting because it offers fans a level of access that they might not have experienced before. So ceremonial, the kind of fight weigh-ins, they give away thousands of tickets to fans for free. And you kind of get a bit of a stadium environment, stadium feel. Access to the NFL's draft experience is free. Max, the event you were talking about with regards to the World Cup, free, I imagine,
oh yes. I
right?
think you had to register via email, but it was free.
Okay. Which I think is especially important, particularly now because everything's very expensive, but particularly because I was looking, the NFL ticket cost has climbed about 40 to 50% in the past 10 years. And so this does give fans a chance to get close to a game that they have probably been priced out of.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's a really good point, Marcus. I mean, it is genuinely shocking how cost prohibitive it is to attend a regular season, just a regular season game of basically any sporting event. I guess the exception is if you like root for a baseball team that's maybe not doing so hot, but and you're, open to going and seeing them like during a weekday in the summertime,
Mhm.
but like
Mhm.
it's other than that, you're talking about shelling out, hundreds of dollars if you want to go with your family to
Mhm.
see,
At least,
again,
yeah.
just a regular season game. If you want to watch them in the playoffs, like get ready to spend, at least twice that.
Yeah.
As I'm a Knicks fan, so like, the prospect of me going to watch them play at MSG in the playoffs is basically off the table
Yeah.
unless someone in my family robs a bank and gives me some money without, telling
It
me where it
was
came from.
it was expensive to see them when they weren't good. I'm interested to see what the cost of tickets will be next year. Obviously, the finals, it was 10 grand to get in the building, 70 to 100 grand to get close to the court.
Yep.
They're good now. So yeah, I can't even imagine. I was also thinking of ways to best reach fans who aren't at the game but viewing content adjacent to the sporting event. There are a couple of examples here. I'll throw out one or two. I thought the Monster Energy Punch Meter. So Monster Energy hosts interactive fan villages outside weigh-in areas featuring digital punching bags that measure striking power against fighter metrics. So you can kind of compare yourself to the different fighters. Participants can win front row event seats by achieving top daily scores. And this other one, the Salesforce Ghost Car experience at major races, Salesforce set up simulation zones where fans drive a virtual lap around the track, and the simulation superimposes a ghost car of the real-time pole position qualifying lap onto the fan's screen, so fans can physically feel how much faster a professional driver takes corners. I've always thought this would be cool in the Olympics if they showed someone like Usain Bolt racing against a regular person, and you could just get a sense of how incredible these athletes are compared to average people. And it seems like these are a few examples of ways that people can feel like they're getting close to athletes or to the event. Any thoughts on the best ways to reach fans who aren't actually at the game?
I think there's also beyond kind of doing something kind of that also ties in to the sporting event like that, just kind of targeting people who are priced out of actually going to the game, but who are still watching it on their devices. A lot of these people are
Hmm.
going to be multitasking on different devices. I think second screen marketing is one of the best opportunities for a lot of brands who are also priced out of these games to still get involved in the conversation around the game. We see that the majority of sports viewers are using a second screen like a smartphone as they're watching.
Hmm.
So that is
Hmm.
really a great opportunity to do it for maybe a lower price. For people who are do multitasking while they watch, there is data showing major events like the FIFA World Cup, 59% of US fans are using a second screen.
Oh, interesting.
That's particularly high among Gen Z. So I think that's just a great opportunity to be able to afford marketing around the game, doing content that relates to the game for people who are looking up things on their phone about the
Hmm.
game.
Hmm. Yeah.
I also, thinking a lot about what's possible to do in and around, just, good old fashioned like sports bars, right? I mean, like,
Mm.
um, that's proven to be a pretty durable, way that people look to experience, these things. And I, my days of going to sports bars all the time are sort of behind me, but it is funny to me how every time I'm kind of in one, how kind of like trapped in amber the experience is. And I wonder whether there's some like opportunity to build in some innovation there, either in terms of like giving stuff out or kind of augmenting the experience in some way.
Yeah.
No free ideas or anything, but that as a sort of like venue or a kind of
Yeah.
like, a canvas, that to me that seems like one that's kind of ripe for trying something new.
Hmm. Yeah. These are great. These are great points. And I've got one more example here, which I'll throw out there before we close the show. Toyo Tires had a face-off booth. So, like a UFC event, they had a digital photo booth that let fans face a life-sized version, high definition hologram, I should say, of a UFC champion for a shareable split screen video experience. The activation leveraging iconic pre-fight stare down that they have at the weigh-ins to produce professional grade content for social. Which I think is a huge part of this as well. As much content as you can help people, fans, create for their own social media platforms is going to also be a huge win. Well, that's all we've got time for this episode. I hope to see you guys next month for more sports marketing. Thank you to Luigi and Mike on production today. And of course, thanks to my guests, Marissa
Thank you.
and to Max.
Always a pleasure, Marcus. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. And to everyone for listening to In the Game, an eMarketer Sports Marketing podcast. Tune in tomorrow to listen to the Behind the Numbers show to hear about the most intriguing imbalances between where advertisers are spending their money and where consumers are spending their time.